Paul Maurice said that prior to the All-Star break that the Panthers opposition is going to have the emotional advantage. The question is, how do the Panthers match that?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, January 24th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. And you can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. And today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and get $100 a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. So, Florida Panther fans, the Cats will have one more home game right up to the All-Star break, and it's going to be a few weeks until you guys get to see the Florida Panthers on home ice right before their next game after that, which won't be until February 6th against the Philadelphia Flyers. So a big opportunity for you guys to go see this team once again at Amerant Bank Arena starting tonight. So happy game day, ladies and gentlemen. But it is a Winans Wednesday, and it is an opportunity for me to once again bring my Wednesday guest host here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Jacob Winans is back. Jacob, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It's a good day for South Florida sports. I'm wearing my Heat hoodie today because Heat made a big trade, got Terry Rozier, and Panthers snapped a losing skid. So I'm feeling good.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you went into that, and it's kind of surprised me after our pre-production our pre-production meeting as well. Was not expecting the Miami Heat mentioning that trade, but it all relates to what we wanted to talk about in this first segment, which is getting a vibe check as far as the Panthers ending their 4-game losing streak. And I want to play a little bit of a soundbite from Monday's post game from Paul Maurice and just what he had to say, and just kind of like the attitude of Paul Maurice as this streak ended. We're gonna play that soundbite right now.
He's scoring all kinds of different ways now, right? Just jumping on a loose puck on the faceoff, gets it back across his body. He's been so good to us. And then I understand why we would talk about his goals, but the defensive part of his game is so good, right? He was playing with two younger players on that line, and they become really good and really strong defensively. He's a penalty killer. He's a face-off man. He does it all. Too bad he has that horrible attitude.
Thanks,
okay,
Coach.
guys.
So that was a question from Ballet Sports' Katie Engelson on Sam Reinhart and just career high in goals, power play goals, and what he does on both ends. But the point in that was not even the answer in itself, but it's just really about the ending of that sentence. And honestly, this might be a personal opinion of mine, but a testament of a real friendship, in my opinion, is your ability to maybe roast each other back and forth and not get offended by it as well. So just that in itself gives me that impression that there's just a good relationship between coach and player, not only in Paul Maurice and Sam Reinhart there, but just a little bit of when it comes to his message being sent around not only the locker room but across the organization, the equipment staff, general manager, everyone in between, because he is the thing that connects everything as far as that. So that's why I thought that answer was pretty important as far as as far as getting a little bit of the vibes there. I want to give you the floor here on and give you an opportunity for a vibe check just based on this soundbite from Paul Maurice.
Yeah, sorry, you were lagging there a little bit, but yeah, I think it's a good indicator of where they are. I think morale wise, I think we tend to panic a little bit when we see a losing skid like what they had. It's been a little bit of highs and lows. We had a really rough stretch, a few just horrible games offensively. Then they rattle off 9 in a row, and you're feeling really good about things, and then they come back and lose 4 in a row. And a couple of them were really unfortunate losses, some bad officiating, and a number of things went wrong. But to get that win and kind of stabilize things, and then just that post game answer, it just kind of gives off the sense that even with the highs and lows, as far as the schedule and the games played, it feels like the locker room has remained very even keel. It feels like the locker room has been really stable. And I don't think they say all the time there's no panic in the room, and I really get that sense that there's never been any panic in the room, even when they're playing really well, even when they're playing really poorly. They kind of remain even keel, and I think that's important for a team that wants to make a deep playoff run, because as we know, when you get to the postseason, there's highs, there's lows, and those swings can be very, very dramatic, and they can come rapidly. And I think mentally for the team staying completely stable in those kind of situations, I think that's the most important thing in a playoff team. That's a trait you have to have, is that mental toughness. And I think it's important that the coach is with them on that level and can lighten the mood, and I feel like he has a good grip on the attitude of the locker room right now.
No doubt. And it also goes back to I forget exactly when Paul Maurice said it during the postseason. Whether it was probably the conference final or the Stanley Cup final. It's just the ability to just have fun through all of this as well. And just and fun as in the ability to grow as an individual as well when the team is going through some skids here and there and all. And I think that whenever you remind yourself of that, things like these don't really bother you as much as they used to. And luckily, I mean, if this was maybe around 2017 to 2020, we're definitely not speaking about that in this tone based on the lack of resume at the time versus the resume that they have now. But it's just really, when you think about it, whenever winning is fun, losing's not. But then when you get those, get a little bit of adversity that the Panthers have gone through, once you get through it, now think about, and I guess we can make a Florida comparison here, right? Where let's say it's hurricane season and there is a tropical depression coming, not a hurricane, not a tropical storm. Do you freak out during a tropical depression, Jacob? Because I personally don't.
No, absolutely not.
No. But so in this instance, during this 4-game losing streak, where you got some loser points in it, wouldn't you say that this kind of felt like the Panthers' tropical depression during this time? And there's a lot of days of scattered showers, some rain, maybe some heavy winds, but now it's past. And you can now walk outside and you could smell the roses again. And it feels so much better than the beginning.
I would agree, and I think that's a great analogy. But I would even take it a step further, because with what I'm seeing now, it's a team that's battle tested, and they haven't always been a team that's battle tested. That, like you said, 2017 to 2020, you go through a stretch like this, and you might immediately start thinking like, oh, this is where the collapse is coming. This is where they fall apart. This is where they free fall down the standings. And you may have been right, because we saw where the Panthers at times were completely incapable of overcoming that kind of adversity. But they're battle tested now. They've been through it. So your tropical depression analogy, I agree with it. But for me, it's almost like some of these things, it's like comparing a new Florida resident to a lifelong Florida resident, where if you get a Category 1 hurricane, someone who's new to Florida may be freaking out like, oh my God, what do we do? That's
buy all the toilet paper in the store.
Exactly. That's the Panthers of old. You would see some adversity like this and not know how to handle it. But the Panthers now are those long-term Florida residents who've been here forever, and they see a storm coming. They know what to do. They weather it and they move on. And I think that's where we're at now. And it's refreshing because I think sometimes as fans, we're not used to it. So you'll see fans, sometimes myself included, will be like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. But and on the ice in the locker room, there's no panic. Guys know what to do, and we don't really have to worry about that mental toughness aspect of it anymore. I feel like the Panthers have outgrown that.
No doubt, and perfect way to end it, and perfect word to use. Outgrowing something for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to continue on the conversation of what Paul Maurice said post game on Monday, and also relate that to how the Panthers can carry on and possibly build on add another winning streak onto their season. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching hiring platform with over 300 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed just doesn't help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, January 24th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday edition of the show, here with myself, Armando Velez, and Jacob Winans here. And Jacob, another thing I want to discuss more about what Paul Maurice said post game, and just when you zoom out, when not only the 3 games for the Panthers prior to the All-Star break, but when the Panthers return from it as well, and the commonalities of every opponent that the Panthers have. And I know there's gaps in between. I know there's a back-to-back and you need to focus on these 3 before you get there as well. And there's a lot that could happen too. But one thing that all of these 5 teams that the Panthers will face in the next 5 have in common, which in order, Arizona, Pittsburgh, New York, Philly at home, and Washington. All 5 of them have one thing in common, which is they're all bubble playoff teams, which Maurice spoke about how the opposition has an emotional advantage. And this is something you never really think about in the as far as the use of those words, emotional advantage. We just think more of the words, the more desperate team, but we don't usually put the word advantage in the same sentence. And that has really made me think more about last season, the Panthers scratching and clawing as well. And now that the Panthers have been the hunted, even during the 9-game winning streak, Matthew Tkachuk spoke about how they're getting everyone's desperate, that the Panthers need to play desperate hockey just like their opposition. This is no different as far as these next 5. And it's truly, truly important as far as matching their desperation. And also, really, even throughout these last few games without Barkov, Maurice also speaking about the ability for the players to run the bench as well and knowing when to step away and for the players to do that, because you don't necessarily need a C or an A on your chest in order to have some and in order to be a leader on the crew. I mean, just think about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, a former captain, Rhino, who's leading the way on the ice. He's doing more than just talking to talk. Sam Bennett. I know Aaron Ekblad has an A, and so does Matthew Tkachuk. But there's so many people who have that leadership quality, and then for Paul Maurice to just say, "Hey, let the guys run the bench." I think it's a very admirable trait of whenever Paul Maurice does reveal that to the public.
Yeah, I think the mentality of the team. I think there's a lot of alignment where messaging is concerned. It's not guys pulling in different directions. It's everyone pulling in the same direction. And I think when everyone is pulling in the same direction, as a coach, you don't really have to step in as much. I think there are definitely times where Paul Maurice will be vocal. If he feels guys are straying from the system, he'll be vocal about it. And you see that on the bench. You even sometimes see that in post game where he'll flatly say, "I didn't like our game tonight." And that's completely fine. But I think like Nashville, the Nashville game, he said that he kind of let the players run the bench. That felt like a game where everyone was in their system, in a groove. It was rolling the lines, and each line was doing the exact same thing that the line before them was doing. When you're running like a well-oiled machine, it takes a veteran coach and someone who really has a good feel for the way things are going to know this is a time where I need to step back and let them do what they're doing, because when you start to be vocal or put your message in there, it can disrupt the flow that they have going on. And the players were in a great flow against Nashville. With that said, I think it's important that they keep that and not lose focus or have any lull before the All-Star break here, because like you said, these are bubble teams. This is a really big chance for some of those teams on the fringe of the playoffs to put 4-6 points in the bank really quick before they head to break. And the Panthers need to have the mentality of, we have to bank these points before we go to the break and give ourselves a little bit of cushion coming out of the All-Star break. And I think it is going to be hard to match the intensity and the mentality of some of these teams, because the Panthers were that team last year. Every point mattered the whole way down the stretch. It was intense. Every game was life or death, and quite literally every single point mattered, because the Panthers only made it in by 1 point. And there's a lot of teams that are going to be in a similar situation, and every single point matters to these teams. And the Panthers, while they're comfortably in the playoffs, in the Atlantic Division, we know how quickly things can change. So I think with that in mind, the Panthers are going to have to keep their eyes on that and match that intensity, which I don't think they'll have a problem doing. It's just it's a unique challenge that you have when you're the hunted versus the hunter. And I think the Panthers are going to have to adapt to being in that role a little bit. And I think they're up to the task, especially starting with this game against Arizona. They've got a bad taste in their mouth about how they played on home ice during their homestand, and I think they're going to come out with a lot of energy and with a lot of intensity in that one.
Yeah, and going back to the players having to run the bench, I just think when you think about a lot of contending teams, and that's what a lot of them probably have in common. Which, again, when you think of Maurice and Jack Adams, when you think about the nature of the award, it likely doesn't fit as far as the possibility to win, as far as like putting more of implementing things, which the coach still has to provide the ingredients while the players have to make the recipe themselves. That's basically where I'm getting at there. By the way, before we transition over to segment number 3, I just pulled up Tankathon's Strength of schedule remaining. Do you know where Florida stands as far as strength of schedule?
I don't actually.
14th. They have the 14th toughest strength of schedule remaining. Boston and Toronto are 2 and 3. Pittsburgh is 7th. Arizona is actually 8th. Carolina is 10th. Yeah. So, and the easiest one is San Jose, but there's a reason why it's skewed in that direction. But but pretty favorable schedule, not the worst in the world for the Panthers as far as the stretch coming the 3 games before and what's remaining after the All-Star break as well. So everything is right in front of the Panthers as far as that. And also Tankathon, I never really go on that site. The really only time I really went on it religiously was 2019 when the Dolphins were tanking, but I might need to use it again this season during baseball season, as I'm not very confident about the Marlins during this upcoming season. That's for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Arizona Coyotes in the second and final game of this season series. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper, and it's past the halfway point of the season, and regardless of where the Panthers are in the standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. All you have to do is pick studs like Nathan McKinnon, Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Sam Reinhart, Matthew Tkachuk, if they record more or less their sleeper projections like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. So to win a $100 bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Cats fans. You win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Third and final segment here on this Wednesday, January 24th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. So, Jacob, just wanted to point something out on Twitter right before we recorded here on the night. And if you follow the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on X or on Instagram and you see that tweet or that post on the Instagram, it was literally like 10 minutes before we started hitting record, so you get an idea of when we hit the record button here on the podcast. But 1-7-0 for the Arizona Coyotes since they switched their name from the Phoenix Coyotes to Arizona. 1-7-0 in Sunrise since that name change for the Oats. And like we spoke about last go round, not a doormat of this franchise as far as everything they've gone through. They look to be on the later end of their build, and we've seen this team recently, so we don't necessarily have to go through all the impact players like Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, and all. And by the way, Sean Dursey had an interview in between both of these games about how forward is the easiest position to play. I don't know if you've seen that interview, Jacob, which was hilarious. I don't know how much. I don't know whether he was kidding or not. By the way, but 4-4-1 since that game for the Yotes. Since the Florida Panthers went into Mull Arena and won 4-1, which Carter Hagee scored. Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Reinhart. That was the start of the power play streak for the Panthers, but got to address the elephant in the room from the last go around. The whole Zucker Cousins situation. Don't know if Cousins is going to play. He might need another full day of practice in a non-contact jersey. So chances of him playing, in my opinion, are unlikely to happen. Still don't know if Barkov is going to play, but he did stay behind to get more ice time while the team was in Nashville. So maybe I think it's looking really good as far as a possibility for a return as well. Do the Panthers probably try to do something to Jason Zucker this time around? Who knows? But how are you viewing this matchup for the Panthers and the Yotes? It's not going to be an easy one. I mean, this will be the first and the front end of a back-to-back, as they will be in Tampa on Thursday night, starting with Florida on Wednesday.
Well, I think Arizona is not a team to be taken lightly. They've got some really high-end offense, and the way the Panthers penalty kill has played lately, you be careful. They played much better against Nashville, but the penalty kill has struggled for a few games, and I think you have to be really careful about giving Arizona power play opportunities. It's a team that may not be there defensively, may not be there necessarily in goal consistently, but this is a team that can and will score goals. The Panthers played them perfectly to a T in Arizona. They use the size advantage. They use their strength advantage that Arizona just doesn't have yet. And we spoke about this when we had our episode following that game. Arizona is not quite there when it comes to size, grit, toughness. They've got a lot of skill, a lot of speed, but they don't have that power element to their game. And the Panthers have to utilize that. I think they have the recipe to beat them because it's exactly what they did the first time. With that said, I think it's going to be a high intensity game. I think given what happened with Zucker and Cousins last game, Zucker was ejected from that game. He did have the fight with Gus Forsling. Forsling's legendary fight, the only time he's ever thrown his fist in a fight, hockey or otherwise, according to him. He's never been in a fight before. Just a super nice guy, apparently. I think given that Zucker left that game after being ejected, he didn't really have much of an opportunity to answer for it. I think he will be asked. I think the expectation will be that he's got to fight somebody. That tends to be how these things go, especially for a veteran guy like him. He knows the business. And I think there will be some sort of retribution and get it out of the way so that elephant in the room can leave and we can get on with hockey. So expect that to happen sometime early. Besides that, I think it's two teams that have a really high octane, fast paced, aggressive style. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be a really exciting game. Arizona's not a doormat. They've been bad for a while, but they are not a doormat. You got to take them seriously. They just beat Pittsburgh, had some highlight reel goals. Got the weirdest goal of the season in Chris Letang passing back to Evgeny Malkin into their own empty net
on a delayed penalty.
On a delayed penalty. So let's not let that happen. But other than that, I think it should be a good test. That's a good team. Some former Panthers over there too. So always good to see those guys.
Lawson Krause, one of them, absolutely. As far as that, and also the best part about that Gus Forsling fight in the penalty box for a long time, and then gets that empty netter as far as like the biggest FU to the Arizona Coyotes after that, and Jason Zucker, which just made that victory so much sweeter, and also just the ability to just lock it down the last two periods. Let's not forget 7 shots on goal that the Panthers allowed the last 40 minutes, and one of them was that shorthanded goal by Kerfoot in the beginning of the third. But I'd have to go back and listen to the recording. But I think even then I said when Kerfoot scored that shorthanded goal, there was not a sense of worry from us as far as the Panthers' ability to win that game as well. But Matthew Tkachuk, he loves playing the Arizona Coyotes. 26 points in 20 games. And also, let's also not forget the last time the Yotes visited Sunrise, Florida, which I happened to be in the building for that one. Matthew Tkachuk got his first hat trick as a Florida Panther as well. So One of the memorable games that we saw out of Matthew Tkachuk last season in a Florida Panthers sweater last year. So definitely something to look for, and maybe a little advice to the people for Bally Sports Florida when they choose their light the lamp selections tomorrow. Maybe they want to consider Matthew Tkachuk for tomorrow's game. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, previewing tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Arizona Coyotes from Amerant Bank Arena, the last home game before the All-Star break. So it's going to be a little bit till South Florida gets to see the Cats on the ice again. Any final words before we put a wrap on this show?
Not a whole lot. Just enjoy this home game. Enjoy these last couple of games, and happy All-Star break to Panthers fans out there. Relax, rest, and get ready for the final stretch. Should be another good finish to the season.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. And tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8.
Awesome, man. Thank you. And I will see you not next week, actually. No Winans Wednesday next week. The
right.
week after. So see you in 2 weeks, my friend.
Looking forward to it.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.